And to fulfill this mission, World Spine Care has established chiropractic clinics in Botswana, Dominican Republic, Ghana, and next month they're opening one in India. And what they do in these clinics is they work in conjunction with the local healthcare system. And the clinics are staffed by volunteer chiropractors that are there. Some are short term, some are longer term, and they also have local administrators. And in the clinics, they provide free spinal care to patients in the local community. So you can go to the next slide now, Erin.
Great. It should be on your page 3. So the yoga project mission and vision, the world, our mission is to support the global mission of World Spine Care by empowering individuals and underserved populations to share the practices of yoga. And the World Spine Care has created the Yoga Project to use yoga as a means of addressing the crippling impact of spinal disorders in underserved regions around the world, specifically as an active as opposed to passive self-care model. So passive care is like when you go to a chiropractor or a massage therapist or an acupuncturist, and so it's someone who's working on your body, as opposed to active care is when you're moving your own body to, so physical therapy, straighten up programs that are offered through the World Health Organization and yoga. And then I'll turn it on over to you, Barry.
Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. There's a little bit of audio interference. Could you guys try muting your phone and we'll see if that stops it?
Sure.
Okay. So we're on slide page 4 now, where it says how the Yoga Project was created. So the program started taking shape around 2 years ago. And it was really the vision of the World Spine Care clinical director, Jeff Outerbridge, who we met with last time. And he had the vision to start to incorporate yoga as part of the active self-care that Erin talked about for the clinic patients. So Erin and I got together and we started to create the program. And both of us have backgrounds training teachers and in therapeutic applications of yoga. And Erin had also been to South America and Kenya, participating in different international volunteer opportunities. And so we felt that given our collective experience, we could really create a program that was both effective and culturally sensitive. So here you see actually the actual training and our ladies helping each other to learn how to sit up straight. So I'll give it over to Erin.
So going on to page 5. So our intention was to create a unique teacher training geared toward training interested participants in communities with established World Spine Care clinics. So we're looking to go into places where World Spine Care has a clinic that's been established for at least a year and created a relationship within the community. In line with World Spine Care's mission, the Yoga Project needed to be sustainable, have an exit strategy, and build local capacity. Because one of the big tenets of World Spine Care is to not make people reliant on what they're creating within a country, both on a structural level and on a community level. So we were clear from the beginning that we would be training local people to offer classes for patients of the World Spine Care clinics, beginning with those in Botswana, since it was the oldest and most well-established clinic. We did a bunch of fundraising. Yoga studios donated 1 class a month. Yoga teachers in New York, Montreal, and Ottawa, and actually had a friend in Denver and a friend in Florida. And I'm sure Barry had yoga teachers all across as well who did donation classes. And Shri Yoga, Barry's old studio, made a community cookbook to sell for fundraising. And we needed to be, as we mentioned, as Barry was talking about, fiscally separate from World Spine Care, because the mandate of World Spine Care is to establish the clinics. And then we are an active self-care within that established clinic, and so we needed to basically prove ourselves to the larger organization.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide, where you can see some of our trainees doing some shoulder stretches with the strap. So we train teachers to offer weekly classes that would provide the back care patients with tools for increased mobility through basic postures, stress reduction, and mindfulness. The classes also included breath awareness, breath exercises, and also the psychosocial support that comes from participating in a class like that, and with the intention to really give them tools to manage their back pain when it occurs, and over time to lessen its intensity, duration, and frequency. And these are all benefits that the yoga, breath work, and mindfulness have been proven through research to do very effectively. And so we knew right from the beginning, when Erin and I started working together, that this was really going to be a different kind of training from any Western model. So we're going to go into a little bit how we created the training and what the content of the training was. So Erin?
On to page 7. So to create the TT, we pulled from our personal experience of working with people with limited mobility, stress or pain, and hospitalization. We also read, we have a research body within the Yoga Project. A gentleman is working out of UMass in Boston, and he's really involved in physical therapy and some of the randomized controlled studies and meta-analysis that are coming out about what elements within yoga seem to be observable and evaluable in different world populations, and that have the best efficacy for pain management, specifically pain management, also for active self-care and just range of motion. But pain is the big one, because the pain limits the range of motion so much. With musculoskeletal issues and with spinal chronic low back pain and chronic cervical back pain. And so we made the manual with, as Barry mentioned, posture, breath, and mindfulness exercises, including or culminating in 45-minute class sequences.
So we'll go turn it over to you. Page 8 now. This is an example of one of our 45-minute class sequences. And we wanted to make sure we had enough content for this first training. So we created 8 sequences like this in progressing in mobility from the beginning. This is our most basic sequence here, and it's all seated. And then as we went through the sequences, they got progressively more challenging to include standing postures, and then mostly standing with support. And in all these sequences, we were addressing a patient population that could not get up and down off the floor without pain. So we started with seated versions of postures and worked up to standing. And we also wanted to offer variety. So, and we design each sequence addressed all the major parts of the body, and every sequence that is being taught also includes breathing awareness, both at the beginning and at the end, and mindfulness exercises both at the beginning and the end. And there's a menu of those to again create variety. So as you can see, just to spend a moment on the progression here, which Angela, this will all look familiar to you. So after the welcome and the centering with a little basic mindfulness and a few different breath exercises, starting with very simple heel toe lift, circling the ankles, leg extensions, seated pigeon, seated cat cow. So basically working through the different areas of the body, going to the upper body, the wrists, shoulders, just a really well-rounded, gentle sequence. And every sequence we taught the teachers to teach also included an emphasis on kind of functional movement, like how to get in and out of a chair mindfully and with good alignment. Okay, Erin.
So just a little bit about Botswana. So the next 3 slides, 9, 10, and 11, you can just kind of look in between. This first one is of a woman on the side of the road. She was selling watermelons, which were very much in season when we were there. We ate a ton of watermelons. And they were all over the sides of the street. And then mopani worms, which are actually a little bit out of season. There's not as many of them at this time of year. And the next slide, which is page 10, is me eating mopani worms. And then if you go to slide 11, I'm just going to let you know a little bit about Botswana. It's a fascinating country. And without going too much into the history, it's a unique African nation because it has never had a bloody war for its borders or within. It's diamond and mineral rich, as well as high-end adventure tourism. In the north are the famous Victoria Falls, and where we were in central southeast, it is arid and mostly rural with low mountains in the distance.
So going on to slide 12 now. These are, the next few slides are photos of where the World Spine Care clinics are located in Botswana. So the flagship clinic is located in a village named Shoshong, and it's in central southeast Botswana. And it's surrounded by hills that are used for grazing cattle, and it's mostly agricultural. And you can see in the next slide a family in page 13, a family, they're making their morning chai. And we chose some of these pictures to illustrate how the body is used in the daily lifestyle. So you can see this man is squatting, the woman is bending over the fire. Some of the families have cars, but it is really a culture that's based on manual labor to get things done. And if you go to page 14, you can see women working in the field. So these farms are mostly subsistence farming. Sometimes they'll bring produce to the market, but it's mostly to feed themselves. And mostly all of the work is done by hand and with no machinery. And if you go to slide 15, you can see this is some of the Shoshong villagers bringing their vegetables to the market. Erin?
Yeah. So this is just outside of Mahalapi, and which is the town. It's a town of about 40,000. It has a very rural feel compared to, say, a town of 40,000 in the west. And it's very rural compared to Gaborone, which is the capital of 230,000 people, which is 2 hours away, much more a hub. See a lot of big box stores, much more westernized. So Mahalapi kind of is in between this village setting and the city setting. And these are a couple women bringing sugar cane from the surrounding farms into town. You can see the high wires in the background. And if you head on to page 16, Mahalapi has a much more infrastructure. It's a small rural city, a few shopping centers, supermarkets. It even has a gym. And so you can see some of the influence of the West coming into this area here. Much more people are working in office-style jobs and shares. There's still a lot of people working on small farms, subsistence farms around Mahalapi, but there's a lot more sedentary living. And then if you turn to page 17, we just included this picture because it's very indicative of the rural setting, certainly. And outside of Gaborone, really a lot of what you see in Botswana. And then you can just go on to 18.
On page 18, we have photos so you can get an idea of where the clinics are located. The Mahalapi clinic on the top, is located in the hospital, and it's open 3 days a week. On the bottom, you see the Shishong Clinic, which is really a trailer that is located within a complex of the village healthcare clinic. There's no hospital there, but there's a clinic, and on the grounds of the clinic is this trailer. That's the World Spine Care Clinic there, and that operates 2 times a week. So they're the same volunteers working 3 days a week at the Mahalape Clinic and 2 days a week at the Shishong Clinic. And this woman in pink here, she was the clinic supervisor that was there. She's a young Spanish chiropractor that had been there for a year serving in both clinics. And so they have shifts of 6 months or a year. Some volunteers come for 1 or 2 months, and they see patients at these clinics. And then we'll go on to 19. Erin?
And we had 2 different groups of teacher trainees. We had a group from Shishong and a group from Mahalape. And we're going to go into
Erin, you're cutting out.
Kind of how different this was the day when Barry gave the ladies their mats, and they were really thrilled to get their mats.
So we're on page 20 now. Sorry, because you cut out for a minute. So.
Oh, sorry, page 20, yeah. And they love their mats, and we use the mats as props, very much so. So because so much of our level 1 is about having people in chairs, they need to be have support behind their back, and then sometimes support underneath their behind, so that they can lift their behind to have a better efficacy in sitting. So that just was a great prop, and those were all donated due to our budget restraints. And we had 7 women in Shishong. The average age was 50, or in their 50s. All were or had been patients of the clinic and suffered from some sort of spinal or musculoskeletal pain. And then if you go on to page 21, for the Shishong group, there was an immediate appreciation of the opportunity they had been given by being able to participate in the training. As former patients in the clinic, they also appreciated the value of the exercise as a tool for active self-care, and loved the mindfulness and breath work as well. They proclaimed themselves, or self-proclaimed themselves, the grandmas, because of the juxtaposition between them and the other half of our training group. They really valued the opportunity to participate in helping their community, because they live in the small village, and this is a culture that's highly community and other-centered. And so they just scooped it right up. They loved it. And then if you go to page 22, Barry will talk to you about the other half of our trainees.
So these boys on page 22, they were part of the other group, the Mahalape group, and they were this whole group were young fitness trainers, and this guy in yellow, he's the owner of the gym in Mahalape. So it was people that worked with him. It was 5 men, boys, and 1 young woman. And so they all worked together at this gym. And this gym, they taught boot camp style workouts and aerobics and fitness training. So this was a very different group from the grandmothers, as you can imagine, because they really appreciated the physical challenge of yoga. And we did challenge them, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But if you go to page 23, you'll see that these very basic, simple stretches that we were teaching them, it was a challenge for them, and it was what they had to learn, was the value of these kind of very simple stretches, and the kind of training they were receiving, and the kind of population that they would be teaching. So if you can imagine, like a 20-year-old boy who's in super physical shape, they were really being asked to slow down and imagine what it was like to not be able to get up and down off a chair without pain. And that was a real challenge for them. And at the same time, this training was offered for free to all these people. So in an important way, we were also helping to build their own capacity. They were committed to teaching classes for the World Spine Care when they finished the training, but it was also clear that they could use these skills outside of their commitment to World Spine Care. And so now we'll go on to 24, a typical training day.
So one of the first things, every day we would meet together. After the first day, we headed back to our housing, Barry and I, and reassessed what needed to happen with these two very, very diverse groups. Due to transportation, space issues, differences in physical ability, and English language skills, we had learned very shortly that we would need a translator for the Shoshone group, as they were pretty good with English, but generally Setsuano was a much easier way for them to communicate. So we quickly decided we needed to separate the groups, and Barry would take the Shoshone women the first week, and I would take the Mahalape trainers the second week, and then we would switch for the first week, and then we'd switch the second week. Twice a week, when the clinical supervisor was going to Shoshone, we would all go to Shoshone. So I would actually bring the first week, or Barry the second week, would bring the Mahalape group to Shoshone. And this gave us an opportunity to have the groups come together in the afternoons to teach each other. And if you switch to number 25, page 25 there.
So the training day started with a morning practice, and you can see I'm leading the ladies through their morning practice, and you can see they're doing a variation of tree pose here, holding, some of them are holding onto the chair, some of them aren't, but they're being taught basically poses that are included in the sequences that they'll be teaching. Because these are the poses that are appropriate for them. So part of the intention of this morning practice was to give them a practice that was suitable for them, that they could work with, and to help them actually become practitioners themselves. If you go on to page 26, you'll see an example of the morning practice for the Mahalape group, which was mostly the boys. You can see the young woman there in the red on the bottom. And their morning practice was much stronger. So that went much beyond the training content, and again, was really meant to challenge them. So you can see them doing a little bit of vinyasa here, and Erin assisting, teaching them some of the actions in the poses. And then if we go on to page 27, after the morning practice, we would review the manual exercises and practice teaching. And here you can see some of the ways that we use the sticky mat as prop for sitting, support for the under the hips, and for the back. So lots of ways to use the mats. And so, you know, like in any teacher training, we're not only teaching them new exercises and new skills, but we're also teaching them how to teach these. So lots and lots of practice teaching. And then in 28, you can see we did the Mahalape group we trained in the hospital. This was just a room in the hospital. And already you can see a little bit different with the Mahalape group. They were more used to teaching, but in the boot camp style. So they really had to learn how to soften their instructions and learn how to teach as a yoga instructor with, of course, attention not only to the physical, but also to the breath and the mindfulness. And we'll go on
to page 29. Those 3 days a week, they were separate. But twice a week, we brought them together again, and this was one of our big wins of the program. If you go on to page 30, the ladies thought the young men in the Mahalape group would not be understanding of them and would move too quickly. And the young men were nervous to teach the older women, who were villagers and considerably older than them. They were just kind of nervous about the whole getting together. And so the boys got a real chance in this, or I'll call them the trainers, how about? The trainers got a real chance to see how to teach people with limited mobility. And the grandmas, the self-proclaimed grandmas, got to see that they could hold their own. And if you go on to page 31, you can see they really got to learn that they were learning just as much as these young men and this young woman, and that they were actually learning at the same rate. And although they were slightly different, which everyone kind of got a kick out of, just the way that, like, very slight approach differences, that they were actually learning the same thing and could teach at the same rate. So we actually had about the same amount of natural teachers and then people who were learning how to teach, which was really fascinating. Harauta, who we'll talk about a little bit more later, she was really happy to be back when the group got together because she loved the grandmas. They really got along well, and so it was a real win that. And they were interested about learning from each other and how that shifted and changed. So if you want to go on to 32 there.
Mm-hmm. So we'll just go through briefly some of the successes from this launch of the program and also some of the challenges that we're going to improve upon for next time. So as Erin talked about, both splitting the groups up and teaching them separately and bringing them together from time to time was a big success, were some of the big successes, because it allowed them to learn according to their own capacity and ability and in the best way for them. And then it also allowed them to learn from each other. We had a lot of the manual. If you go on to page 33, right in the middle of the training, we realized that we needed to create a visual representation of the sequences. So that was a big help. And in general, a lot of our manual is visual because this is such a visual culture. And we learned that that's really important. Teaching the morning practice according to the needs of the group, as we showed you, was another big benefit. I think that they all got a lot out of it. And Erin and I worked a lot each night. After each training day, we debriefed for usually a couple of hours because this was really the launch of the program. So we have a huge document of how we adapted and what we learned that we'll be able to improve and implement next time.
Great. So if you go on to page 34, some of the challenges we faced, as I mentioned earlier, was one of the big ones was translation. So that one we came upon kind of early on. And so in the future, we need to make, especially the breath and mindfulness practices, which require a lot more description and the other ones can be done much more visually, but those are based in language. And so we do need to translate those sections into Setswana. Structure of the day, at first we were having lunch kind of in the middle of our morning day. It's a very morning culture, and so we needed to switch and do all of the training. We did 5 hours with them every day, so that's requesting a lot of time. So we'd have a little break, a kind of a tea break in the middle. But then one of the things that we provide for our trainees is, because we are absolutely providing a skill for free, and we are requesting from them that they teach classes for us on the other side of that as a means of repayment, but we also want to feed them. It's 5 hours requested in their day, and depending on, they're not at their homes, so we also gave them a lunch every day, which is quite a nice thing, and it builds community. So it builds psychosocial support within their own teaching community, which is really important. With the Mahalape group, we had a lot of issues with timeliness and attendance, and I think part of that had to do with the fact that it was hard for them to identify, hard for them to understand what it would be like to be in this community, and so they were a little less motivated overall. We learned it was a bit of a cultural thing, but it was also about value. And the Mahalape group, there has been ongoing challenges with structuring and in the post-training, whereas the women in the village, they're getting together, they've got all these flow charts and they're figuring everything out and they make sure everybody has even teaching days, whereas in Mahalape, that is falling to the clinical supervisor at World Spine Care, and so we're still figuring that out a little bit. If you go to page 35, The other interesting thing we had a challenge with was asking trainees to articulate their experiences in a culture that emphasizes community over group over personal's individual identity. And self-reflective thought is not as much part of their culture. The how are you doing, how are you feeling, it's not as readily available. On the other hand, they were willing to weigh in when we started to figure out a way to ask questions that were more effective, and the two groups interacted and participated really well in group debriefs eventually. If you go on to page 36, we also, as you can see in this picture, my favorite picture for struggling with space issues, especially in a small village when we were bringing both groups together and had to have two separate spaces in the morning and then a group space in the afternoon, and having free space as opposed to space that we could pay for. So there was space available that we could rent, but then we had to come up with the budget to rent it, and we didn't have that budget. So it was a lot of kind of rejiggering and trying to figure out in a small village how to actually accomplish that. And the third one was transportation costs, which have actually been an ongoing issue for the yoga project, because if we want it to work in Mahalape, people have to travel far. In Shoshone, it's okay, they're walking places, it's a little bit more part of their culture, but it actually costs people to get around in Mahalape, and to ask someone who's already volunteering, who is doing a free service, to then pay for their own transportation, it's just not economically viable for our teachers, and that became an issue within the training, and we've learned that it's also an issue on the other side of the training to keeping it going. And then if you go on to page 37, graduation time.
Yeah, so at the end of our 10-day training, we had certified 6 of our 13 trainees to begin teaching classes, and the other 7 we organized practice teaching. Well, the whole group is practice teaching, and since the graduation, everyone in the group has started to teach, but that included a commitment to ongoing practice and taking each other's classes. And the classes in Shoshone are going really well. There's like 20 to 30 people in each class. And in Mahalape, as Erin said, we've had challenges with the teachers, but the classes are, I think, between 8 and 10 people, so they have been ongoing. And we're also, well, we'll talk about the next steps. I think we should spend some time on that, Erin, because that's where Angela and Barry, they're interested in. So let's talk about the outcomes and learning, and then talk about what we want to do next.
Great. So the community, so if you go onto page 38 there, the community, the biggest thing that we learned is the community is best served by its own. So we need to teach teachers, so our trainees need to be patients of a World Spine Care clinic. So they're ensconced within the community and they have a connection to World Spine Care. These are people who understand what it's like to live with pain, and it's best to see the representation of yourself in a teacher. And we found that with the Shoshone group, this was very much the case. And going forward, we now want to support the women who are doing this, and we want to kind of check in with them, see how the teaching is going. And because it will be almost a year from the time when they started, we really want to be able to help buoy them up. So we want to give them more skill set. We want to give them more to work with. We also want to help serve the community they're serving by getting more, teaching them more poses that get them up and down out of the chair, using the chair as a slight support, but more and more balance work, more and more on their own feet, and just a little bit more challenge, as well as giving more breath and mindfulness practices, just so they don't get bored, and there's a little bit of variety. Ideally, also, we want to teach them the functional range of motion that's required and the kind of ergonomics that are required to get up and down off the ground well, even when you're in pain, because it's a requirement of their lifestyle, and they need to be able to do that without creating injury or creating worse pain outbreaks. So actually using that opportunity as what can you do on the ground, what can you do on your bed at home and how can our teachers teach that as well, so that people are taking this practice into their lives and into their homes. In Mahalape, we want to teach some patients of the World Spine Care Clinic, much like we did in Shoshone, so that we have better efficacy in the Mahalape program. So that we'll do essentially level 1 in Mahalape and level 2 in Shoshone, so that we support our teachers who are there. And that requires basically splitting up the manual that we already made. It was a huge manual. We had tons of information, which is ideal, but now we can take that information, expand a little bit upon it, and really support those teachers that are there and help them support their community even more, since there seems to be such a huge calling. The other thing is budgetarily we are really struggling with transportation issues and chairs and props. So we have so many people coming in Shoshone that we have to buy chairs, and that's another cost that's being incurred in the program as a whole. And so we're kind of trying to figure all of that stuff out. I think I covered, yeah. And then if you want to go on to 39.
Yeah. So this is Erin and I, and of course, we received so much personally and professionally. I think the biggest thing is being able to be of service and in a way bringing the practices to this whole new population of practitioners. So it was really nothing about we didn't go into the science or the theory or the philosophy behind anything we were doing, just really giving people tools to help them manage their pain while being sensitive to the cultural context. So very secular, respecting, the religious boundaries and the spiritual context for them.
So just so you guys get a little bit of a feel about the efficacy of the program for even our teachers. Mula Siwa, who is the woman with the polka dotted skirt in this picture, she's 68 years old, and she always is referring to herself as the old lady of the group. She's the oldest of the group. And it was really beautiful to watch her just be part of this community of women who were teachers. So beyond even these tools that we were giving, the psychosocial support of the teacher group was really wonderful. It got her out of her house every day. She's almost blind. She's got a decent amount of deafness. She's she's HIV positive, and she's got a lot of physical issues, tons of arthritis, barely has any movement in her ankles at all, has broken one of them. And so getting her just up out of her house, having to come into the village every day, meet with this group of women, that alone has huge physical benefit and huge psychosocial benefit. And getting her to teach in her community was a whole nother thing. And she really got to be part of her community and see that she has a lot to give still. And then if you go on to 41, Barry's going to talk about another person.
This is Ukavitse, and her living is she sells candy to the village. So she sits and walks around with a little bucket of candy and sells it to people. And she shared that she woke up regularly with numbness in her legs. And after a few days of the training, she was practicing the ankle circles and the foot flexion exercises, as soon as she woke up in the morning, and it went away. So she became like one of the big spokespeople for recruiting the villagers to take the classes. And she was saying, you can throw out your prescription drugs. These exercises are way better.
It's really interesting that she said that, because one of the big research things that is coming out is through constant yoga practices that have posture, breath, and mindfulness, and bring groups together, that the amount of pain medication goes down drastically. So it is kind of fascinating that we got to see that right away. And it's not that we're curing people of chronic pain. Chronic pain is indeed chronic. It's the lessening of those outbreaks and how often they happen, how brutal they are when they happen. And it was so wonderful for us to see one of our teacher trainees within a few days feeling that difference. This is Haurauta, which is the woman we spoke about earlier, who's a young woman who really struggles with being in front of people, the fear of public speaking. And she grew so much during the training, and she actually now is traveling 2 hours each way by bus because she had to move to Havrone, which is the larger city, the big capital city, to Mahalape to teach once a month. And the students absolutely adore her patience and kindness and attention to detail. So going from someone who just was dreading being up in front of people to someone who really thrived from the program and is continuing to thrive. And then
And then
40
and then
is a lot of what you were saying, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think we kind of we already gave you the overview of how the classes are happening today and what we're hoping to do in the next phase of the program. So I think that's it